Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Festivals Helping Festivals. Today, our topic is on volunteer management, and our host, or my co-host, is Marnie Lapierre, who is the knowledge, the brains behind all of this. Yeah, we will just have a chat and see where it is you want to go. Marnie, over to you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for joining today. I know we're starting to gear up towards the season and people are starting to get busy. Grant writing is just about over. I know the Experience Ontario has already been submitted, but there's a few other grants out there. So I understand and I appreciate your time with us today. It is a small and intimate group, so I think this means a great engagement in case you can't hide behind all the other names that normally log in, but that's okay. Um, just to give you a bit of background, my experience in volunteering has been longstanding, from a teenager where I assisted with the Royal Canadian Legion to going into my full-on career with Heart and Stroke Foundation. I was there for quite a few years, and I worked with about 1,500 volunteers because our catchment area was humongous from the James Bay coast down to Timmins, where I'm located, over to the Quebec border and to Gogama. So lots of volunteers, lots of programs, lots of managing personalities, and trying to make sure we reach benchmarks. And from that experience, I segued into the tourism department, where my role was festivals and events and special projects coordinator. And that meant, again, developing a volunteer program for the city of Timmins because we hadn't had one for a very long time. We used to have a volunteer center, it had closed. And so we started developing a program specific to city-led events. And from there, ran festivals for the municipality. And now I have many, many hats in the community. I'm no longer with the municipality, but I support municipal events. And I also am the volunteer development lead for United Way up in our region. So I know a little bit about working with volunteers. I don't know everything. I am still learning. I actually, I'm taking yet another course in volunteer administration. Um, I'm never stopping learning. And I do this because I understand the value of having volunteers engaged with an event or a purpose. And I have them on a pedestal because they're there because they want to be, not because they have to be. And they all have different reasons to be engaged with the potential purpose that they're there for. So it has been a challenge over the few years, to get volunteers. We've gone through some ebbs and flows, and those organizations that have a wonderful bounty of volunteers, kudos. I want your tips and tricks on how you keep them. And for those that are, struggling like many others to fill roles because there is that retirement gap that's happening. The baby boomers that were volunteering after retirement are now retiring from volunteering. And the space left, we've tried to fill with students because of those 40 hours, but 9 times out of 10, 40 and done, and you don't see them again. And, trying to get families involved is difficult. Two-income families, very busy, kids have extracurriculars. So where are we getting the volunteers? So that is a big portion of what we're going to talk about today regarding recruitment, target outreach, clear expectations, and personalized engagement. We can touch on screening process, about the application process, background checks, interviews, and references, and then the management portion, which is tricky if you haven't managed volunteers before. It's an entirely different system and process as opposed to an HR related situation where it's a staff member. So there's different ways of working with them. It's probably a topic we could talk for at least a week on, but we'll try to keep it a little succinct today. So, and I thought
And
I
if
would,
I can
sorry.
Sorry if I can interrupt for a quick sec. For those of you who've just joined us, if you don't mind putting the event or the company that you're with in beside your name, just so that Marnie knows what event, what people and event she's talking to.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. And I also apologize ahead of time. I am coming down from a really wicked head cold, so I still have that residual cough. So I may mute on occasion so that I can get rid of this lung that seems to want to come out. Anyhow, um, so the recruitment process, the whole point of festivals helping festivals is we support one another with things that have made our event a success or has improved and enhanced it. And each festival has a ripple effect to other festivals. People who have great experiences at events will tend to go to other events because that that rush of being there and having such a great experience. So by us sharing information, it helps to boost the industry, to help engage the community, the volunteers, the stakeholders, everybody involved. And 9 times out of 10, I'm using that a lot today, 9 times out of 10, your first point of contact attending a festival is going to be with a volunteer. It's inevitable. You will engage with volunteers when you're attending as a spectator. So getting these volunteers to come and help out is a challenge. And one of the points under recruitment is a targeted outreach for volunteers and finding those channels to get those potential volunteers. We know the standards of using social media, community organizations, post-secondary institutions, all of that are dedicated to volunteering. But I'm just wondering if there is a way that your organization has tailored a recruitment message or something to highlight the unique benefits and experiences of volunteering at your particular event. Has something worked really well for you, or is this something that you're looking, for from others that are in the same situation? So I'm going to throw that out there. I'm hoping that we get some answers back because it is a really important thing. Without the volunteers, it's really hard to have an event. Most definitely. So I know we have, we have 10 participants now. That is wonderful. I see Kathy. I feel like Romper Room. I see Kathy from Thunder Bay, Christina, Dave, Kyle, Marie-Claude, and who also? And Molina from the Concierge Services, and Sam Stovall from the City of Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay is representing today. Welcome. So I'm going to pick on you guys. How are you finding your volunteers? What's working really well for you that you might like to share with us? Since we're all in different areas, so we're not poaching.
I can go first. So I'm Sam. I'm with the City of Thunder Bay. I am the volunteer program coordinator with Recreation and Culture. What I find works really well with our volunteers at events is having that point of contact on site. So, for example, myself, I attend all of our large scale events, and I'm kind of the volunteer supervisor on site, making sure that the volunteers know exactly what their role and responsibility is, and then having those volunteers know who they can connect with should there be something that comes up or they might not know who to get help from. So kind of having that point person on site, especially for large scale events, or maybe it's a team of kind of volunteer supervisors for different areas or zones. I find that works really well, especially also volunteers should be recognized for the work that they are doing while they're on site helping, whether it's providing them with a break or just a friendly hello, just to have them being noticed that they're there to support. Otherwise, that event would not go on without them.
Perfect. That is really important, having that point of contact. How do you get them? Because you work for the municipality, correct? So how does the municipality attract volunteers? I probably know a little bit because I did do an event up in Thunder Bay a couple of years ago. So, but to share with the group, because I've worked for a municipality, and sometimes it is a struggle where your taxpayers may feel that there should be paid roles for this because this is what their taxes are for. It's just one thought process. How are you reaching your public to get those extra hands on site?
Yeah, so many of our volunteer roles, they are more roles to like help those volunteers with networking and more getting involved in the community. We do see a large number of youth volunteers where a requirement of their high school diploma is through getting volunteer hours. So I do many presentations and work closely with guidance counselors at high schools to help recruit and retain volunteers there. Another kind of recruitment effort that we do try is we try to offer our volunteers something as opposed to just getting them to come out and help, but more so in the sense that we want to provide them with something that they can take away from the volunteer experience. So whether it's a volunteer looking to kind of enhance their English skills, we can work together with them to create a new volunteer role that can also assist us at the event, but at least they're also getting a takeaway from it. I'd say recruitment through the pandemic was quite difficult, especially because most events weren't happening in person. So you'd have to rely on volunteers having the technology to kind of get involved. Whereas now we are seeing more people get involved and wanting to make a difference in the community. From my experience, I wouldn't say it's been extremely difficult, like getting volunteers to come out and help at the events. I also feel that volunteers feel kind of more recognized being at an event and being like, oh, I helped to put this on. So it kind of gives them that entitlement a little bit. So I think that helps as well.
That's wonderful. So you're building on, their pride for the community, being involved, they're recognized. And it sounds like you've got a really nice wide base of volunteers of very different demographics. I love the fact that you've got this opportunity for them to develop new skills, especially if they're newcomers into the community. I have to say, in the events that I've been organizing the last couple of years, Timmins has been booming for newcomers, and they want to be involved. And oh my gosh, I'm embracing them. I'm opening the doors. Here's your registration form. We want you, because there's so much talent coming into the community now. And and I have seen events that the City of Thunder Bay has put on, and that's you've got it really, really good system. I know I've complimented Catherine many times on that registration package to set up an event there. It is like a book, like as thick as that volunteer administration book that I have, and that's a wonderful document, because it's like, seriously, people, if you reach out to the City of Thunder Bay, you need to ask about their event registration program, because oh my goodness, it's got everything from A to B and then some. So Sam, with your experience with the volunteer, do you come from a volunteer background? Like, did you go into post-secondary to learn more about this, or was this one of those, oh, the municipality has a role to fill?
So, yeah, no, I do have a business background and human resources degree. I did and still do a lot of volunteering in the community myself. I am currently a camp director for a local nonprofit organization, and I just love the world of volunteering myself. So having a passion for that, I think, really helps in the role that I am with the city.
I will say that when a potential volunteer sees your passion for supporting them and for supporting the event, that really helps. It's awful to say, but it really helps sells them into it. Because if you have somebody who's not engaged and just, I just need a body in the role, it's a little tougher to keep them hanging around. But no, that's great to see. Thank you very much for sharing that. That is, I should have had you as the guest expert on here.
Well, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Does anybody else want to contribute to the recruitment process and what's been working for your organization? Or questions, especially for Sam here, who is now our resident expert today. Oh, okay. Oh, Christina.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, our organization is a little bit unique. So for me, this is really exciting to learn about volunteer recruitment and retainment. So our entire agency is run by volunteers. That the whole program is to provide mentorship to children and youth. And all of the mentors, we call them big brothers or big sisters, they are all volunteers. And we also have a thrift store. It's a social enterprise, and it is exclusively run by volunteers. And then all of the money from that social enterprise comes back into our mentoring programs. So it is like a full circle, but we could not do what we do and help support the children and youth without volunteers. And as you were saying, like pre-pandemic, we were full of volunteers, and then post-pandemic, trying to rebuild that has been difficult. So I'm interested to start hearing like about the targeted recruitment and how we do that, because it is different. I mean, we have to do targeted recruitment for big brothers or specifically big sisters, or we have in-school programming. So we're always looking for different types of mentorship relationships. So it's interesting to hear just how, especially municipalities, how they run it. And this is perfect timing. We actually just had our volunteer donor and funder appreciation night on Thursday, last Thursday. And it brings you right back when you have some of the mentors and our volunteers stand up and speak and share their experiences. And it brings you right back into why you're here and what you're doing. And like you said, how it sells itself. So then it kind of recaptivates all of the other volunteers and reminds them why they're here, whether it's a difficult situation or, the timing of anything. It's really comforting to see them kind of sell themselves back into it and remind themselves why they're here and why mentorship is so important. I mean, we're just trying to ignite the power of the children and youth across Niagara. So thank you for sharing all of this. I'm excited to learn anything that I can about recruiting and retaining volunteers.
Wonderful, and a great organization, 100%. You have a lot on your plate when it comes to that because everything's volunteer related. So I appreciate what you're doing, and as we all do. And it is an interesting process of a targeted outreach to get volunteers. And it's sometimes it's try the method, see how it works. If it's a small group that you need to recruit, those one-on-ones are nice and easy because you usually know somebody that's going to fit that role.
Mhm.
But when you're in a larger area like yourself, it can be a little bit more difficult. So the headhunting, as I call it, is a little bit more of a process. Day of event volunteers are one thing. That's usually where you engage local organizations or, groups of friends that like to work together. Like in Tim, I know I've said it before in some of our speaking things that we have this group of 5 ladies. We call them the beer ticket ladies because they will sell your beer tickets for you at whatever event is going on that's selling beer. And they are the experts and they expect to be called. And it's just lovely. But then there's like other roles that are a little bit more difficult to fill. So that's where, within our board or our committee, we have those conversations of like, do you know somebody that has these skills? And it's developing those roles so that you know what you need. Somebody knows somebody with at least half of that, and what can be learned on the job kind of thing. At least in my experience, it's sometimes, yes, you just take the person with the heartbeat and then work on it from there. So I know in my experience, it can be a little bit tricky, but there are ways to be more targeted, like working with your immediate board or committee and even your volunteers that you currently have. I always have tried to have an exit process that, you go through the whole review of their time with you and, that you get the critiques back. And then you hit them up with, do you think you might know somebody who would be qualified enough or you would trust taking over your role and getting those referrals out? And those kind of check-ins are a great idea to have throughout the year with your volunteers because at some point, it happens. A volunteer has to leave the role for whatever reason, and you need to fill that almost immediately. And especially with an ongoing organization like yourself year round, I'm sure that, you've seen turnover and you've got to put that in. Festivals are a little bit different because it's usually held just the once a year. And, it might be your committee members you have to fill. Day of event, I've been very fortunate, knocking on wood, that we have almost too many volunteers for day of event because, that's not a big commitment. It's a one day. So yes, targeted is amazing process. There are resources out there about targeted approach for volunteers. If you check out Volunteer Canada, And they've got a lot of training modules in there. I'm actually doing one of their courses right now. I'm doing two courses, but I'm doing one of the courses about volunteer management and recruiting. So as I learn from that, I'm also learning from all of you as well. And I can just imagine what the volunteer programs will look like by the end of the year. And I just wanted to mention, we also have Kyle. Kyle Sipkins is on our board, and he is from INSERC, and he stated in the chat that he is a supplier who works in a number of communities across the province. I can testify to that. And some successful strategies I've seen to attract volunteers are offering festival tickets, passes, enough for their family if they do a volunteer shift at a festival during the weekend, or creating a volunteer community, like a pool of volunteers who enjoy volunteering at several events throughout the year in that community. And they'll be able to spend time with friends and family, familiar faces, and enjoy the appreciation parties after the event. So that is absolutely true. If your event is a ticketed event and you want, an enhanced volunteer program and attracting more volunteers, what can you offer them from the event? Tickets, as said, perfect. Creating a pool of volunteers to draw in throughout the year, saying, look, like for example, a municipality may run 4 or 5 events during the year. They may be able to utilize the same volunteers. I know that happened with us with the Great Canadian Kayak Challenge, and it's a great way to keep them continuously engaged, coming back. Offering them the choice roles that they want. If it's somebody that could really do it well and they want to be a part of it, give them that role if they're ready for it. And if they're not ready for it, get them trained, right? So there's just a couple of things. And Debbie, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was just going to ask Kyle to come and talk about what he put in here, but that's okay. You got it. I do have a question. I do have a question though. How do you keep the volunteers engaged? How do you keep the positive energy and any negative feedback because you're small communities, right? And I know it's not it's a humongous task, but how do you keep them coming back year after year, and how do you keep the naysayers, from putting a damper on your event? Or do you? Or is it a problem? Am I making something up?
I don't think you're making it up. I know I can contribute to that, but I'd like to open the floor to anybody else that's here too. We've got quite a lovely group of experienced people in that. So would anyone like to speak to Debbie's question? Kyle?
Hi, everybody.
Here's Kyle.
Most of what I see is kind of anecdotal, just kind of from seeing at events. But one thing I've seen from that can help preempt negative experiences is just rotating volunteers through tasks, because not every task is as engaging or as interesting. If someone has to stand by a gate or whatever. So one thing I've seen with volunteer coordinators who are just really awesome at their role is just rotating through those people frequently, pairing people together. Obviously, yeah, they might be chatting a lot, but they're actually having more fun as well because, they're there as volunteers and getting to spend time with people, enjoy it. And, it just kind of makes the time go faster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. That's one of the things that I've always implemented is as pairing them up, especially the teenagers that are coming in for their roles. They don't want to be by themselves. They like to work with somebody they know. And so when I get a one-off of, Joey, who is 15, and he's a little bit shy, I'll ask him, do you have a friend that you think would want to come and volunteer with you? So you're not alone. Like, especially if we have them as a greeter or in the parking lot, at least they've got somebody they know that they're comfortable talking to, and they're not alone. I have had senior citizens that will come and volunteer, and they're usually a group. I think that's where our beer ticket ladies are heading to in the senior world. There's, they do like to be together, and, they've got that support. And when you've got happy volunteers, that adds to the atmosphere, right? So I think that helps quite a bit in the public's perception of your event, because if volunteers are looking miserable, they're going to have this perception of what is going on at this event, that these guys are not happy when it's supposed to be a wonderful, happy day for the community. It happens, it can't always be perfect, but, throwing that in there. Yeah.
And if you have like really great volunteers, people who bring great energy, they love showing up, they're very experienced. Having those people as, your volunteer team leads can also really help set the tone for what the experience is going to be. And they're also going to be your, to use the phrase, boots on the ground. When they notice that maybe energy is dropping, that they're, maybe they need a break, or maybe the weather is turning, they might be those great problem solvers to help make sure that a volunteer wasn't sitting for 2 hours getting damp and cold and, just, not having the best time. So really having those people that you can lean on.
Exactly. I've developed team leads that will look after certain portions, and I usually have 2 or 3 a day for whatever part of the festival that those volunteers are operating, so that the volunteers have somebody to go to. Those leads are checking in on them if there's, inclement weather, or ensuring that they've had their breaks, or we send out a volunteer with a cart with water specifically for the volunteers at all their different stations, making sure they're getting that. And doing that check-in, like, is everything okay? Sometimes the public isn't always nice, and you get some very challenging attendees, and if, check in if there's been any issues, and I refer back to the teenagers again. Teenagers don't usually speak up about a situation because they feel that they're going to get in trouble because it might have been regarding an adult. Keep that open door policy. I think that really helps to create a good experience for the volunteers. And then before they leave, when they've done their final shift, have that check-in with them. And if you yourself as the volunteer coordinator can't do it, usually you have somebody who is working alongside with you as they're checking out. Have a little list, like, how did everything go? Was everything okay? Did you enjoy? What was your big takeaway from today, kind of thing? Just a quick little 2 minutes so that they can get on their way. And then to keep them coming back, keep them engaged by saying, hey, thanks so much. We noted that you mentioned at the end of your last shift, thanks for sharing that with us. Try and get photos. If you can get an event photographer, get photos of the volunteers, or encourage the volunteers to take a selfie of themselves and send it to you. And then throughout the year at certain points, like, for example, post-event wrap-up, send out that thank you. We noted here, here's your picture volunteering. Thanks so much. Christmas time, send out the Merry Christmas to you, hoping you're coming back. Keep them informed with what's happening with the event, and they'll feel like they are part of it. If they're giving you some feedback, and if there is a way to implement that feedback for change for the event, let them know, hey, you know what, your suggestion, we brought it to the board. They thought it was a great idea. We're doing it. They're going to be like, holy moly, I made an impact on that event. I am engaged. I am part of it. Not just I'm here to pick up garbage kind of thing. Other things can happen from it, and you can help them develop their role into something more. I know for the kayak challenge, I had a high school volunteer that stayed with us throughout high school and college and his first year of marriage. It was wonderful. It was great. It was like, I didn't have to tell him what to do. He already knew. He was telling all the others what to do. It was great. It was rare. It doesn't always happen, but it's just a little tips and tricks of keeping the volunteers engaged, making them feel valued and heard, helps to keep them engaged, and keep it consistent. Don't call them up 3 weeks before the event and say, hey, you coming back? If you have not, talk to them for a year. It's going to be like, oh, you only call me when you need me. Check in with them. Or, if you happen to see that volunteer at another event volunteering, send them a quick message. Hey, great to see you keeping up that volunteer spirit. Saw you at such and such event. Great job supporting the community. Little things like that make a difference. It is time intensive, which is why in your volunteer plan, there should be somebody assigned the role of volunteer coordinator and with specific duties like that or tasks to keep that volunteer engagement. It's not just taking the registration, handing them the role, their PPE, and sending them out into the field. There's so much more to it. They're human beings, right? Not slaves or employees, as some refer, where you're just expected to do the job. We're thankful for their help, right? I tend to go on. I love my volunteers.
How about, oh, Jay had his hand up first.
Thank you. A couple of years that I worked at Oktoberfest in Kitchener-Waterloo, they had some great things with their volunteers in their festival to keep them engaged. One of them was, I guess, in the quote-unquote off-season, they had a volunteer gathering with a Oktoberfest band and a keg tapping and a dinner where it was just all volunteers that got to attend that. So, you know, when the regular festival's on, they don't have time to do that kind of stuff. They're working behind the scenes. So this was kind of a nice way for them to experience the festival. And it's all free for them. It's a thank you. It's you've done great work. We appreciate you type of an event. The other thing they did was at one of the larger, I think they called it the President's Lunch. They had volunteer awards. So long-standing volunteers were actually brought up in front of the crowd and given plaques or something of that nature and recognized as volunteers. So again, I think what Marnie said is true. Like every chance you get to recognize the volunteers and make them feel special, it'll be much easier for them to come back year after year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
So I have a question again. Does anybody, long time ago when I was doing volunteer for, not for a festival or an event, but there was like a wellness committee that, I mean, Marnie mentioned that volunteers would go out and make sure people had water and stuff like that. But this was more of a wellness committee going around making sure food, snacks, but also like a cheerleading group and making sure that the volunteers were, if they were in a bit of a, like, they were bored or whatever, that they kind of picked them up and gave them some inspiration. So I don't know if I know getting volunteers is hard enough, and getting the kind of people who are cheerleaders wanting to, walk around, an acre of property to engage the volunteers. But I don't know, does anybody do anything like that? Or is that like something that's not feasible?
or now that you've heard it, are you going to implement it? I think that's a great idea. Well done, Debbie.
Well, for us, with our agency, oh, sorry. So of course, like we don't run festivals or anything of that large of a scale. But I was just thinking about how you were saying, if the door it is an outdoor event, making sure that your volunteers aren't wet and all that stuff. So we have because we just amalgamated, so we are now one big agency. So we service 12 municipalities. And we do now 2 golf tournaments. So this is what just kind of ignited me to think that. So they are both very long days. So like you said, we have some of these volunteers that come back year after year just for this event because they love it so much. But we're lucky because they're not walking around acres of property, but they do go out in a golf cart, and we do have like cheerleaders, and they go out with snacks and the water, and to make sure, because it can be long, it could be, you're roasting in the sun, or it could kind of be wet. So we do have them go out with umbrellas and snacks, hot chocolate. So we do have like a little team of cheerleaders that do that. And you could tell you can tell by the photos that are posted throughout the day, how they actually start to increase, and like just the happiness factor is just so much higher. Because like you say, you always want to feel connected or appreciated, and not everybody wants to be out roasting in the sun or sitting in the pouring rain, but they do it, but to feel appreciated and valued. So that cheerleading factor, that is a big deal, even on just like a one-day small event like that. So I could imagine the impact that would make at a larger weekend festival, or just a festival in general. So I do think that's very important.
I just had a vision for your golf tournament, and not only cheerleaders, but maybe have a dog in the back that's delivering the water to them, right? Like it's, just something Okay, I'm so into the dog world right now, but just something like that. Or, you've hired buskers. Like, I know they're going to be out in the crowd, but have the buskers go and engage with the volunteers. Kyle, you may have stories on this, but get them engaged with the volunteers because they're all wearing identification that they are
Mhm.
volunteers for your event. So I don't know, just an idea.
I would like to drive that golf cart with the dog in the back.
When you said that, Debbie, this is dating me because I think the rest of you are far too young. But I was thinking of George, the big Saint Bernard, the show.
Oh my gosh, yes. I do know.
Oh, there's
That's exactly.
water thing come down. We have up in Timmins, we've got a I don't, oh my gosh, this is awful, but it's therapeutic animals and they bring the dogs to the event and you get to pet them. They walk around the entire event with the dogs and they stop with the volunteers because like puppies. And the dogs just absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Yeah, therapy dogs.
Yeah, yeah. Kyle.
I just wanted to mention, Debbie, like you're absolutely right. Like that's one thing that when we're going around at events, we always try to look for those volunteer shirts or the people with vests, talk to them, make sure that they're having a great time because we know that they're there and without them, the event wouldn't be happening. So we want to make sure that they're feeling as valued and engaged as everyone else. And I think most event professionals, do that as well. They recognize those things and are so grateful for them being there. And as Jay was mentioning as well, like those volunteer appreciation parties, uh, volunteer appreciation awards also go a long way. If you see something that's happening during your event, just making note of it and having awards after just to recognize those people who went above and beyond, just to make sure that everyone else was having a great time, making sure people were dry, making sure people were happy and keeping that energy up. When people see that those things are being noticed, it goes a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. I mean, that's how I ended up in this whole industry. I started as a volunteer and then got voluntold and voila, I'm here kind of full time, We created a volunteer program that the volunteers received specified training to their role, where they got to meet their leads from the committee or the board. And, some of the returning ones would be able to provide feedback and experiential points during the training sessions. And we usually held 3 or 4 because people are shift work and babysitting, school, what have you. And we also made sure that the volunteers had a meal voucher so that they could turn it into any of the food trucks that were on site. The food trucks would collect them and bill back to the committee so that the volunteers at least were guaranteed at least one meal during their time there so that they could be part of the festivities, working with their schedules. And that definitely made the experience a lot more satisfactory. Some volunteers can only give 2 hours. Some want to be there for the whole 2 days from open to close. That can be a little much, but working with the volunteers to make sure that they're getting this good experience and understanding what they want. And most of the time, they want to be engaged with the event. They want to feel that they're part of it and that they have an impact on the event. The younger volunteers maybe are just like, oh, just get me my 40 hours and I'm happy. But if you make their experience very, very good, and I'm not using good English today, they'll be more likely to come back or refer others to you. Teenagers may come in a group of 2. The next year they may have 4 or 5 with them, and it's a good thing to have. I like overscheduling. I'll be honest, if we're in the parking lot and it's only calling for 3 and they bring 2 friends, you know what? Those 2 friends are going to go there too because they're all happy, they're together, and they are monitored. But this way they're feeling valued and they're part of it. And I'm babbling on again. I apologize. Kyle, save me.
You're doing great. That's I was just kind of curious, and this might be actually like another session in itself, but I'm just wondering, since there's so many organizers on the call, how many events have volunteer training sessions beforehand, And, what are some of the things that they include in those sessions before, like, what you were talking about before is if your volunteers are the first point of contact and typically get feedback or sometimes get brought the problems to them, do you have a plan in place on how to relay that information quickly? You know, um, just as an example, like how do you escalate things quickly so that a volunteer isn't going, oh, well, I don't know who to talk to about that. If they go like, oh, okay, I'll call so and so, and then they will escalate, or just as an example.
I have lots of examples. Does anybody else have some? I don't want to do all the talking, which is rare.
Marie Claude, do you have any?
Oh, Debbie, you went mute.
Oh, I was just asking if Mary Claude had anything. I'm pointing people out.
You're doing what I
Yeah,
do.
well, for our event, so there's a lot of younger folks that come out and volunteer. So it's really hard to get them all to come out and like do trainings and stuff like that because they're always working like different types of shifts and stuff like that. So this year, what we did was that we had two members of the group that did a video. So they had it wasn't just like a basic video just talking, it was like interactive and stuff like that. So we sent it out with like a volunteer manual so they could just watch it whenever they got the chance. It was really short, but just simple. And then we had like key volunteers that had more training. So they had like groups of volunteers under them so they could just give them a little bit of like feedback just before they would do like their task. And behind their accreditation that they had around their neck, so they would have like all the major phone numbers and all the key people they would need to call if there was an emergency or something like that.
Perfect. I love that idea of aligning them with key volunteers. That's empowering your key volunteers. They may not realize that at the time, but that is a supervisory role in a way. And I think that that is wonderful. And then when you remind them at the end of their shift or at the end of their time with the event, saying, do you know what you contributed to this event? You helped out new volunteers and got them to understand their role and made them feel appreciated and supported. That's fantastic. I love to hear that. And that you have a plan for those that can't attend an in-person training. I know myself, I've asked the volunteer who has not received training to come in about a half an hour before to get the lay of the land, introduce them to who the people are that they would go to for information. Kyle, you had mentioned about, that how to escalate, if there is a situation, who did they contact? There are different tools out there that you can purchase or use for free. I mean, cell phones are like your portable office. We all know this. And there are different apps that you can use for volunteers so they can communicate with you as well. I know with the United Way, we've just created one. It's through Galaxy Digital, and we oversee all the not-for-profit organizations who can add in their volunteers and do scheduling. They can pull reports and all the rest of it. That's just one, but there's quite a few out there that are free communication tools, like even WhatsApp. I mean, worst comes to worst, it's an immediate communication with the other person or group. So fantastic idea of the way that you're supporting your volunteers. I really like that. Love it. And Kyle has mentioned in the chat that he's done volunteer trainings that explain all the roles in advance, time, expectations, rotations, and accessibility training. And there is a free training deck that is available online from the Pan Am Games. But there is also the Accessibility Ontario one as well, AODA. If you just do a quick Google search, and you even get a certificate at the end of it. I think it's fantastic, so that your volunteers can take that certificate and put it on their resume as well. But just one of the many training opportunities that are out there. Thank you so much. Sam from the City of Thunder Bay, your hand is up.
Yeah, so with our training here at the City of Thunder Bay with our volunteers, they do a formal onboarding process. So we do a short volunteer interview. They do have to complete online modules. So AODA, WMIS and workers' health and safety. And then we do have a volunteer handbook that we have the volunteers review. And once they complete the onboarding, they become an accepted volunteer. For events specific training, we typically have their volunteers shift about a half hour prior to the actual scheduled shift. And that's where we facilitate a full training on our emergency plans, who the direct contacts would be on site. We run through how to use a walkie-talkie. So for most of our events, we are like in a contained area where walkie-talkies do work. So I am typically their point of contact. I would show them how to use it and then let them know the locations of walkie-talkies should there be a situation that they don't see a staff or their contact person around. And then also, depending on kind of the size of the event, if we have zone leads, we make formal introductions to the zone leads so that those volunteers working within that zone know who they would be connecting with. And those zone leads are also kind of like our cheerleaders, which is a very great suggestion. And I highly recommend that everyone takes that on, because providing that recognition to the volunteers and making them feel noticed is very important to the retention of them.
Absolutely. Love hearing that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Dave, your hand's up. Hi.
Yeah, one of the things, and again, I'm going to reference Oktoberfest because that's Jay and my frame of reference with volunteers. But one of the things Oktoberfest did, and it was with volunteers and committees, whether it was a board meeting or just a committee planning meeting, is at every meeting there was a health and safety talk and there was a binder of one pagers. So it was required that every committee read one of those at the conclusion of their meetings, included in the minutes, and then everybody had to sign a sheet that they in fact listened and understood, and then that was kept in a binder as well, just for just for due diligence purposes. Should anything ever come up, that everybody has gone through the modules, and we kind of steered the committees into which box sort of affected their committees the most, and then intersperse some stuff that was general in knowledge to everybody. But I thought that was quite a unique program and worked well.
I love it. I love it. I think that that's a fantastic idea, because it's easy to forget if you've done your intake training and it was like maybe 3 weeks before, you're not going to remember everything when you get on site. So having that available, I think that is an excellent idea.
Yeah, and really quick. It was like 30 seconds to a minute.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Yeah, they were like one topic. So how to lift correctly, how to work with a ladder, what happens if you get stung by a bee, all little things like that, all stuff that they'd be required to probably do on site.
Oh, that's great. That is great. And maybe not every volunteer needs that, but I think it's good just in general that the volunteers do that, and especially the leads and committee, so that everybody's on the same page, and they may not remember all of it, but they know that it's there for reference. It's almost like the women's sheets that you get for working with chemicals and things like that. It is you'll pick up on it when you do get into that situation. And hopefully nobody gets into the situations. Hoping for a wonderfully incident-free festival season for everyone. That's my wish for you today. Okay, so we only have about 10, 12 minutes left. And I thought I would open the floor to anyone that has, maybe some questions from the discussion that we've had today, or something that you've come here with that maybe you were shy a little bit at first to express. I'd love to see, the engagement, and, if you have comments or anything about today's session. I will also draw your attention to the chat where, thank you, Christina, has provided the AODA training link that everyone can do. And that is free, by the way. Unless they've changed it in the last couple of months, but it was free before. No. So does anybody have any questions or comments or, suggestions? Because we're going to be starting the next season in September for the meetups. Is there anything that you would like to see the group talk about, any experts in certain fields for the festival industry that, you'd like to have access to discuss certain topics with? Because this is Festivals Helping Festivals. We're all working together to support one another. And, we want to support you in your endeavors with your events. So, if there's something there, floor is open. Anybody? So quiet.
Chat's open too.
Oh,
You
yes,
can type
that's
it in
true.
the chat.
That's true. That's true. Okay. Well, then we did mention that it would probably be a little bit shorter than normal. I mean, we've had some great engagement on here, and I mean, I could talk for weeks on end about volunteer, you know, engagement and retainment, and all the ways to support them. Um, it is something that has been very near and dear to my heart for a couple of decades now. And it's always the first thing that I look at when I'm scheduling a festival is, okay, so we know where and when, and we know the time. So how many people do I need and what kind of roles are they going to need? So, working on those role development portions, very important. Debbie.
I do have a question. So how do you know how many volunteers you need for an event? Is
Uh,
it based on the
my own
size of the event? Is it based on how many people you're anticipating? Is it based on how many volunteers you have and you're just going to make it work? Um, just curious if you're starting a new event. How do you know?
I would say yes to all of that, and trial and error. I have been known to overbook volunteers, and that was because I wasn't myself sure what the uptake would be. And, things happen where a volunteer may have to drop out. I always wanted to make sure that there was a backup plan and I didn't have to call somebody in last minute. I've been blessed with having been a volunteer and worked at many events that I know basically the size of the event, what the anticipated attendance will be, and what the peripheral activities will be, and how will those need to be supported. It is a planning process. And, I've said day of event volunteers, but day of event volunteers will wear different hats. You have your parking volunteers, you have your site maintenance, which is, your garbage volunteers, you have your greeters, you have your volunteers that are looking after different sections. For example, we have a marketplace tent. So we stationed the event information pop-up booth outside the marketplace where there was two dedicated people at all times to assist with any issues in the marketplace, because things happen, like electricity can go out, maybe somebody's pet has gotten in there and made a mess, garbage issues, even conflicts between vendors sometimes happens, and that gets escalated, and it usually gets escalated to me, and I know all my local vendors, so can handle it. But there's other areas too, such as we incorporate the children's activity area. So we make sure that there's at least two people there monitoring the site in case of garbage overflow, if there's an injury or something like that, or if the porta potties suddenly need to get cleaned, they escalate it up. So it's taking a look at the site, how long it's going to be, what type of volunteer needs to be there, and what kind of shifts you're going to have. Because not everybody wants to do an 8-hour shift, and some do. So, how are you going to rotate that out, kind of thing. So it's a whole planning process unto itself.
So is there any rules of thumb? I guess that's really like for somebody who may be setting up a new event who's never done it before, is there rules of thumb or is it trial and error?
Depending on the
And does
expected.
anybody else know? I'm just wondering, like from the floor, if there's, sorry, Marnie, I cut you off.
That's okay. That's okay. Um, I usually go by the number of days of the event, the hours of operation, and the expected attendance. So because like I'll be honest, at an event, sometimes the biggest thing that has to be taken care of is garbage. And if you don't have a team to do that, everything overflows really fast. And I've been at an event where it got out of hand like within an hour, it was insane. There was like 18,000 people in the park, and the food trucks were just barely keeping up. And those garbage bins just got so full. And when you've got, little teenagers trying to pull these big things out, very difficult. But for me, it started out with trial and error, and now I have kind of a template of what I use for a certain sized event. I go back to the Great Canadian Kayak Challenge, 3-day event, 18,000 people, and the hours of operation were from 9 until 1 a.m. But luckily, we didn't have to have volunteers after 7 o'clock, because then it was just the beer tent and the main stage. So volunteers were not required because the beer tent was RFP'd out and they had to maintain it themselves. And I would probably have anywhere from, depending on the year, 60 to 120 volunteers for what was expected. Whereas the multicultural festival that I run, each booth is operated by its own organization, and I have volunteers at the door for the donations at the door, and then at the back to make sure that cars are not coming through when they're not supposed to come through. It's not a parking detail, but it's just making sure people enter the correct way. And garbage. So like I might need for that afternoon 15 volunteers max. And even that's a
Okay.
lot. That's a lot. So it
Okay.
depends on the event.
Thanks, Marnie.
For me, anyways. I know that there's others out there.
Christina had unmuted. She was going to say something too.
Yeah, ours again, because it's such a different thing. But even when we have larger events, we do a ratio system. But again, we're dealing with kids, so that's why I decided. I was like, oh, I'm not going to say that because that's very event specific. But yeah, we always try to do a ratio, even for larger events. So we like to have 1 staff per 4 attendees is what we prefer.
Okay.
Yeah. But yours is a
Okay.
much larger scale, so that would be
Right.
a ridiculous amount.
Would be the whole festival.
That would be, yeah. You'd have 2 festivals, one just of volunteers and the other of attendees.
There's a whole new festival to open up, the Volunteer Festival, and have everything pertaining to volunteers. Oh, I think I just got an idea. Okay. But it's true. Every festival is a little bit different as to what they require, what they're comfortable with. It depends on board and committee support as well, because how many of those are coming on as volunteers at the event, not just in their role as a board member, but actually doing things, boots on the ground kind of thing. An example of that is I'm co-chairing the Rotary Rib Fest. Yes, Kyle, the Rotary Rib Fest is happening. You need to come back to Timmins. And we're training the board and committee to be event volunteers, because except for one, none of them have ever participated at an event before, because they're all new. So we're training them, but we're also bringing in some of my lead volunteers, my key volunteers that I've worked with at other events to allow their committee to job shadow. So they'll train them going forward. And Kyle has contributed with, don't want to have the meeting run over time, but quick food for thought. If your event has thought about engaging sponsors, if you have a local here we go. Have a local union, for example, to engage their staff as part of your volunteer pool. And some of them will have their own dedicated volunteer pool. Absolutely true. Banks are wonderful for that. I have firsthand experience with that. They have a program for their staff. Volunteer time equals lieu time, because they're representing, and they can wear their branded T-shirts or what have you. Like say it's the TD Bank, they can wear the green shirts with the little TD on it as they're doing whatever for the community. And you get this lovely free service from them. It's wonderful. Intermittent Wi-Fi. Is social media the best way to attract volunteers? One of the ways. Conversations in person. And who was it Sam, were you not the one that said you went into the schools and to other organizations to have discussions about volunteering at events? Face-to-face, it's hard to say no face-to-face. We've all been in that situation, right? Where somebody comes up, and that's how I got into this. Somebody came and had a conversation with me and said, I was thinking about you doing this for us, and, totally sold me on it. Bit of a sales job, but, if you have the time or you have somebody in the organization that's really good at it, encourage them to do it. Set a benchmark. We need so many volunteers. Go. Kyle, you had your hand up for a second.
Oh, I was just going to quickly mention same thing. Like if you have a sponsor, whether it's a bank or a trade union or something like that, encourage them to or work with them to help them have a marketing activation on site as well. Whether it's like a trade union working with kids to build little birdhouses or something, or a bank have them do a chalk mural on the ground so their volunteers are also working with communities as part of it, and that way it's also helping them facilitate that connection, not just be visible, but helping them to meet their engagement um, needs as well. So sometimes you kind of have to like help handhold them to these things, but it might be a great way of being like, yeah, we can get a team of 30 volunteers and maybe 5 at a time are building birdhouses with folks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as my Google Home Assist device just announced, I don't know if you all heard it. It is noon now. I still haven't figured out how to turn that notification off. And I will wash my hands as it has told me to do. Um, I think we've hit it for today. I am really looking forward to engaging with you all throughout the summer. I want to hear how your events are going. I love hearing about events because I like to travel my province, and if there is something going on, I'm going to go check it out. And I encourage you all to do the same. And if you have the time, volunteer for another organization, see what they're doing and make note of what they're excelling at and what maybe they have challenges, because that can be reflected into your own programming for your volunteers. Being on the other side of the coin is sometimes an eye opener if you haven't been doing it for a while. And it's a great way to appreciate everything that your volunteers contribute, and will make your event even better from that experience. On that note, Debbie.
Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you for your questions, your knowledge and sharing. This has been a great season yet again. We will be starting up again in around September timeframe after the festival season is over. And we will see you in the fall. Have a wonderful summer. Enjoy your events. Reach out to us if you have any questions, any way we can help you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great festival season.